Next, last of the program, James Ryan, coming from the point of view of the health technology developer. It is not the AstraZeneca point of view. As you can see in the proceeding, the summary has been written with Maria Garcia, so it's you speak for the vice chair of the HTA working group of the EFPIA. So what is your point of view, and what can you give us as the main messages?
Thank you ever so much, and great to have the invite. Hello everyone here in the room and those online. Today I want to just give an industry perspective on what has been our experience today internally as we prepare for JCA and moving forwards. And you know, health technology developers are innovators, and we're here about developing medicines and getting those medicines to patients. And the JCA to us is an enabler of that. It is a member state regulation. It should be and is embedded within national processes and pathways with there. But we're not just a data provider. JCA isn't just about evidence itself. And so as we've moved into 2025, we've gone from the sort of policy side and preparing for this into actual practice. And today I'll give you a few examples of the experiences that those companies that are currently in JCA have been experiencing, some of the oversight, and also some of the real positive signs that we've seen as we've worked with the Secretariat and with the coordination group itself. I'd like to thank all the companies that have voluntarily shared their experience. We won't be disclosing anything confidential or product specific today. Okay, so for health technology developers, it's important to see that this regulation is an investment. We are investing a lot of resource, we're investing a lot of money into doing it. At the moment, we do not see that this is going to be offset by reduction in what we have to do at a member state level. And we're committed to working with everybody to enable us to do that, realise some of the ambition of the regulation in reducing duplication, improving predictability with that. So why is it costing more? Why are we devoting more time to this? So I've got five different steps here, which gives you an example of what every technology developer is going through as they prepare for JCA. We've talked about it for many years. We carry on talking about it, but PICO predictability is crucial to us. We have very restricted timelines between getting the final scope and delivering that dossier. And within that timeline, we would have to update or run systematic reviews that take many, many months to do. You have to find out all the different pieces of evidence for the comparators if you can do that. You've got to run complex analyses, particularly the indirect ones, and then you've got to write this up. We don't have time to do that, and therefore we need to start much earlier, typically 12 to 24 months earlier. But because we have no insight into how the PICOs are consolidated, it means we have to overpredict, just in case what we're trying to do is avoid a situation where we get a final scope where we have PICOs that we haven't planned for, because we therefore don't have the time to do that. So we have to overpredict. That's costly. Why is it costly? So part of what we have to do for the dossier is known as a systematic review. That means we have to set the parameters of that review much larger than we would typically do under the current non-JCA systems. With that, we have to think more about populations and subpopulations. We have to think more about subgroups. We have to look at more outcomes. With that, we have a huge list of safety outcomes that we have to capture that almost all HTA bodies around the world don't request in there, so that is new to us. And we have to look at different time points, etc. with that. So we're setting the scheme of what we have to do much wider, and we're extracting a lot more information. And that takes a lot of time. And that's because we can't understand from the 20, 30, 40 PICOs that we predict, what are the 10 or 15 that we might get? On top of that, we then have to do extensive analyses, far more analyses than we've ever done to date. So this isn't around reducing duplication. This has actually increased the amount of analyses that we have to do. And then we've got to write the dossier up itself as well. And this is substantially bigger than anything else we do. And remember, we still have national procedures to go through. Hopefully we can offset some of that clinical assessment aspect, but not all of it itself. And then, as I say, we've got the national procedure. So what are those processes? We're trying to work with each individual country around what that process is, how we fit into it. We've seen some really good examples, actually, with sort of sharing of their national PICOs. We'd call that best practice, engagement with stakeholders. We're one of the stakeholders, but clinicians in there as well is really important for us, and patients, of course, with that. But what's our expectation? We're investing all in this. So what is that return on investment? What we do hope for is that over time, we will get more predictable PICOs and try and encourage why the unpredictability is causing extra work for developers and a barrier to entry into the EU. We will ask, why are all these analyses actually necessary? We're looking at potentially between 1,000 and 2,000 pages of a submission. And that's probably on the minimum side. If you have a lot more PICOs, you could be entering several thousand analyses on that. How a national HTA body is going to take that into account, that creates extra work for us. It essentially creates extra work for HTA assessors at an EU level and those appraising the information at a local level with that. So I want to move on also to what have been our collective observations to date, and I've picked out 5 key steps here. So the first one's around eligibility. So we've recently had, 2 or 3 months ago, the Q&A document around eligibility. That's been really helpful, and I think one of the learnings we've all got to take away from this is HTA people, both at a national level and in companies, are not experts on the complexity of EMA regulatory pathways and legal regulations. So that has actually been a helpful document to us. It may have caught some of us off guard as to what is in scope and what isn't, but it moves us forward into that. I think where we would like to see, just to help others, and we're a larger company, so we've got that ability to understand and think, but there'll be a lot of smaller companies that may not even be EU based, who are probably trying to work out, what does this mean? It goes back, Michael, as to what you were saying around they're not updating the timelines potentially or notifying the Secretariat. They may just not realise what JCA might actually be. The second part is around timings. So what we've observed, there's been variability as to when a JCA starts on that. But actually what we've seen over time is that variability has come down, and now we're starting to see a consistency on the date that it generally starts. That's a really good outcome for us, and we're all learning here, so it's a learning journey for all of us. We've got to expect that things will change over time. There's also been pragmatism. So we're observing, where there might be a potential extra data readout on something which may coincide just after a submission being done. Actually, let's talk, let's see what's the best way so that we're not wasting resource on both sides to come to an efficient outcome that is practical for all whilst within the regulation timeline. So the explanation meeting, and this is probably one of the more sort of disappointing sides from an industry perspective. We want dialogue. We want to make JCA a success, not just for ourselves, but for HTA bodies, the clinicians, and critically for patients. And so dialogue will be needed. And we've had experience of UNETA of these sorts of explanation meetings, but what has actually happened at a JCA level has been rather limited. So what we tend to find is we are read the PICOs out. And that might take 5 minutes, it might take longer depending on the number of PICOs you are. We have limited ability to actually have a dialogue, to ask questions around potential approaches to things, to get clarity. A lot of it to date has been around, we'll refer you to our guidance or to the legal acts. And that's not a dialogue, and that's not setting the system up for success for us as developers to deliver what was the ambition of this meeting in the Implementation Act around completeness and a high-quality dossier. It is not set up for us to do that. The fourth aspect is around joint scientific consultation. This is around future evidence for Europe being appropriate. There's been limited opportunities at the moment with that, and that's partly due to capacity and capability, which is completely understandable at this stage. But there's also some process aspects to this. Clinical development doesn't happen every 3 months. It doesn't happen every quarter or it's monthly, it's ongoing. And actually for some therapy areas, particularly oncology, the pace of clinical development is very, very fast. And so the timeline from applying, being accepted, and getting final advice is just too long for us to actually have meaningful use of that advice. And also, people are putting a lot of effort into applying for it and hoping they'll be accepted. That requires a lot of internal resource and coordination. And so if they're finding themselves rejected, one of our challenges would be, how do we convince our internal stakeholders moving forward to use consultation? And then the Secretariat questions. We're seeing a lot of delayed responses. So some real positive news here is, again, with the Q&A coming in and out, what is it for eligibility of medicines? We're now seeing a much quicker return on that. But questions around confidentiality, copyright of the materials that we'll do, what is actually published, how will that conflict with the EMA's clinical trial transparency procedure? It may duplicate it, it may override it. We don't know, so these remain questions from a developer perspective that we've got. So I'm just going to finish, final slide, around we're committed to ensuring JCA is a success. We want it to be a success for everybody, and particularly patients. So we are monitoring, we're having a look, we're trying to do that in real time so that we can provide insight back to the Secretariat and the coordination group. We want to engage in transversal materials, but also during individual JCAs. Let's have dialogue. The best HTA systems have dialogue. We're not necessarily seeing that in the way that this has been set up. And then let's solve these issues together. We want to be partners in that. We have a vested stake in the success of the regulation. Let's be part of that solution together with all of the stakeholders. And with that, thank you ever so much.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, James. Very important point.